So thank you for doing this. I looking forward to having this for the association, and but let's let's start from the beginning. Tell me about uh, Carol and John. What led you to buy into a Bermuda 40 to begin with?
That's a unique story. We had actually bought an Allberg 30, and it was handled by Inter Yacht, the brokerage firm. We had a few papers to wind up, and I went over and met with a young broker to do that. His name was Jim Mann. So Jim and I got all excited talking about boats, and he says, "You have to come over and see this Trip Lunch 29, which was on a creek nearby." So I go over to look at that with Jim, and I'm anxious to move on. I signed the papers, and he's showing me this Trip Lunch 29, and at the next dock is a Bermuda 40. And this was 1973, and it was Andy and Judy Skinner's boat, Capella. Well, after that, my love affair with Bermuda 40 started, and we kept the Allberg 30 for about 3 years. And I decided I wanted a 40-foot boat for my 40th birthday, which is as good a criteria as you're going to get.
I think that sounds perfect.
Anyway, I decided it would be a Bermuda 40. So we started a shop this summer when I was still 39, and went up to New England and with Jim Mann, this young man who had originally showed me the Trip Lunch 29. We looked at a lot of boats, a lot of Bermuda 40s. Had Bob Hinckley show us about 4 or 5 in Southwest Harbor. Traveled up and down the coast a bit, but we stopped in Boston to look at a Bermuda 40 called Superstar, and she was at John Alden's wharf, commercial wharf in downtown Boston. And when Carol and I had been thinking about the boat, we thought maybe a white boat or a black boat or maybe
Even a gray.
even a gray boat. And then we got to see Superstar, and she was that teal color. And I think we were lost at that point.
Yeah.
But she was a fabulous, was and still is a fabulous boat for us. We've owned her since, no, that's not right. She's owned us since the fall of 1976. And been a great boat.
So you got into it. You got into it then in 1976, and that's not long before the association formed. So how did all that sequence line up?
What happened is we had the boat purchased in the summer of '77, but hadn't brought it back to Annapolis. And we had a neighbor, Ernie Janess, who had a Bermuda 40 here in our community. And Carol and I used to go down and moon over in the evenings. But since we hadn't purchased it yet, we didn't get on the list of Bermuda 40 owners. So we had no idea about the association being formed until my boat shows up at the dock. And Ernie Janess said, "Well, when did you have this Bermuda 40? And we said, "Well, we've owned it for a while. It's just getting here." Anyway, that was when we learned about the Bermuda 40 Association, and it had just been formed. Just that's
So you knew the people who were principally involved in that. What was sort of the motivation for the association to at first?
The prime mover was Blair Thaw, and I don't know how this will turn out, but we had crewed for Blair and Sandra on some occasions. Let me see it.
Wasn't he the second Commodore of the association?
Yeah, he was Commodore of the B-40 group at the time.
Yeah.
But Carol was very close to those guys because she was
They made me the first secretary at the formation of the thing. And we had, Johnny mentioned the trip boat and the former Commodore Capella.
Oh, Andy Skinner.
He was at the meeting, and they wanted him to take an office because he was a prime mover. And he said, I will take an office, but it has to be the immediate past Commodore's position.
So that
that's
got
what he
incorporated
became.
into the bylaws.
So you've been engaged with this, with the association, with the boat. What's sustained your interest in this over time? The organization, the just the delight of sailing this design, the way it works below decks. Tell us how have you stayed so engaged?
All of the above, but that's me.
Exactly.
Let Carol.
No, I agree. It's the whole combination. We love our boat. We love the gatherings. There's just everything about it. The association and the boat just pleases
So
us.
you've been engaged from the start with particularly the social aspects of the association, the rendezvous, the cruises, and such.
Yeah,
Well, that was the purpose of the association. It was all social in the beginning. And what we did, for example, I don't, Marianne, I know you're familiar with it. We basically had the rendezvous afloat so that the center of the reason for going was to be there on your boat and then share what improvements did you make this year? Here's how I rigged this. Here's how I rigged that. Those kinds of things. It got awkward because it was very hard to have a group dinner on a raft of boats, but we shared cocktail hours and we were friendly enough that the wives tended to make who was going to pair off with who for dinner where. So it worked out very well, but originally the purpose was social. It started to grow in a very odd way. We had a fall meeting at the Annapolis Yacht Club because many people were going there for the boat show who had brought the boats down to the boat show. And to pay us back, they took us over to the boats that were at the show before the show opened. So we could get an early look at what they brought to the show, what was new, how they handled some things. It was mainly Phil Bennett at the time, who was the chief salesperson for Hinckley. Us members who already owned the boats were more interested in talking to somebody from the maintenance department. So what new improvements have you made? For example, Carol and I, if you remember the picture you saw, we ate breakfast at that beautiful table of glass Bermuda 40. Well, Carol had to have one of those. And eventually we paid Hinckley's price and got one.
and that price was more than we paid for our dining room set.
The interesting part about it is that as we started, it was just the folks who knew one another on the Chesapeake who were sailing a Bermuda 40. The salespeople thought that made a good selling point. So they were advertising in the Hinckley newsletter all about the Bermuda 40 Association on the Chesapeake Bay. And you could join that and you'd be, part of a bigger group and so on and so on. So that's really where our growth came from. It was the Hinckley Company telling people that this was available to them as a Bermuda 40 and Hinckley yacht owner.
That's curious because so many owners associations, boat owners associations, are really historically were driven by the manufacturer that Tartan Yachts or Hunter or O'Day organized rendezvous and as long as the manufacturer was behind this, as long as they were putting energy into it, the associations thrived. This is really seems to be quite the opposite.
Well, in a way it was. It was found money for them in effect. We did all the work. But again, coming back to Ernie Janis, Ernie was quite concerned about writing a manual, which I wrote the initial version. Uh, he was quite concerned about us looking like we were in competition with the Hinckley Company. And he wanted to keep that relationship clear. We were owners, we weren't a source of getting, I hope most of our members know or realize that only 1/3 of our membership are on the Chesapeake Bay. And the other 2/3 are located up and down the East Coast, in Singapore, in New Zealand, in Australia, in Holland, in uh, Nova Scotia. I
So
think,
you'd like to see us be able to serve those members who are more geographically dispersed.
yes, and that's what's coming up in this meeting on the change in the bylaws. And I think that's the future of the organization. We need to return to our social roots. We get together to enjoy being with one another on the boats. And I think we should provide in our bylaws revisions, as we consider them next year, a way to have a rear commodore, a port captain, some named person in a geographical area that will try to organize the cruises at a local level. Keep it about getting together on the boats, keeping it about social functions, and then do what that group, that subgroup, if you will, of members would like to do in order to join things. If I have to look at one positive thing that's coming out of this coronavirus, is that you can run a group without everybody having to be in the same geographical spot. So if we have members who are in charge of activities in a geographic area and they are part of the executive committee of the association, they can still attend meetings and make meaningful contributions.
We're called Bermuda 40 Association of the Chesapeake, but there's never been a Bermuda 40 Association of Long Island Sound or of Buzzards Bay, has there? We're it.
Not that I know of. So what does that mean for us? Should we change the name? I could argue that either way, but it's what we have done deliberately is keep the name Hinckley off it, so that we didn't make it appear that we had Hinckley Company sponsorship. So we would still need some Bermuda 40 association, probably without Hinckley in front of Bermuda 40. But we have a lot of very smart people in this group who could come up with, I think, a very appropriate name. And I'd rather take care of 100% of our members than 1/3 of our.
So we should really take the next step with the manual, make that accessible on the website, add to it. We should perhaps expand our research on the history of these individual boats, tracking more of these down, and that sort of page by page presentation as you suggest. What else can the association do to ensure that it's going to be of value to today's members?
Well, I think if we get the social aspects to be about the boats and rendezvous, I think that'll be great. I think having the website will enable us to put a history of those.
John, you've served as Commodore, I believe, more than once of the association. You've
just once.
Just once. You've been with the organization. Tell us a little bit about how it's changed over time and how you'd like to see it change further now.
Well, I think the association has changed along with the changing membership. When the boats were newer, they were I don't want to say the only top-end boat that Hinckley sold, but they were the one, except for the pilot, almost the entry-level boats. But as they've gotten older, their market value has fallen off. And now you're going to get people who are interested in preserving the boat rather than I just bought it and I'll bring it back to Hinckley and have it fixed. The other part of it is the geography. Uh, People are not going to take a boat on the Chesapeake Bay and bring it up to Hinckley in Southwest Harbor. So you've got to have a local establishment.
John and Carol, this has been wonderful. You've been at this for, I think, longer than any other member of the association today. So tell me what you're looking forward to next season.
We're looking
We're
forward to
hoping
get
for
some
more
sailing here.
cruising on the bay this year. Safe cruising with no problems. And I think, we've done a lot of work to the boat. Well, we had Gibson Island do a lot of work to the boat. And I think she's better than ever.
And she'll be 50 on May the 22nd at 7:30 in the morning. So we'll probably have a little bit of a celebration.